In the free-to-play market, patterns tend to emerge. Business models are refined, monetized, and replicated across dozens of games because, for the most part, they are proven to work. It is rare for a developer to look at that profitable formula and decide, right before a global launch, to throw the entire thing away. But in recent times, developer Pan Studio did essentially that with their upcoming action RPG, Duet 𝗖𝗍𝗶𝗵𝘁. During what was supposed to be a standard launch announcement, they revealed they were removing the game's entire gacha system, completely abolishing its stamina meter and shifting their business model to be purely cosmetic driven. The decision was so sudden and so contrary to industry trends that it immediately generated a wave of praise alongside cautious skepticism. It raises a fundamental question. Was this a purely player-friendly act of goodwill, or was it a calculated move born out of necessity? This video will explore that decision, from the player feedback that forced their hand to the specifics of the announcement, and what this new post-gacha model actually means for the game. To understand why a developer would tear out the financial heart of their own project, we first have to examine the game they had initially built, and the core conflict brewing just beneath its surface. The identity Duet 𝗖𝗍𝗶𝗵𝘁 was selling during its beta was simple, and for many people it was appealing. It was pitched and appeared to be an anime Warframe. You know the fantasy that label implies? High speed, acrobatic movement, wall hopping, sliding, and vaulting through the air. You could seamlessly switch between shooting a rifle and pulling out a sword, all within self-contained, instant-based missions. You go in, clear the objective, and get out. On a surface level, the game delivered that. The problem, and the reason we're discussing it today, was that the core systems holding the game together were in direct conflict with that fantasy. The gameplay felt free, but progression was anything but. This conflict stemmed from two main points of friction. The first was a stamina system they called Sanergy. While energy systems are common, this one was particularly restrictive. You had a daily cap of 240 Sanergy, and the most important missions, the ones needed to craft high-end weapons, cost between 80 and 120 each. The math is simple. That limitation meant you can only make 2, maybe 3 meaningful attempts at progression each day before being forced to stop and wait. The strict time gate was then compounded by the crafting system itself, which seemed to truly break player trust. Getting a top-tier weapon wasn't a clear path. It was a gauntlet of RNG. It is basically the roll of dice that decides if you get what you want. In the beta, you first needed a random mission to even drop, and then you would spend a huge chunk of your daily stamina to run it, only to hope the specific parts you needed would drop from a pool of possible rewards. It was luck, stacked on top of more luck, all locked behind that severe time limit. One beta tester calculated that with the system, acquiring a single 5-star weapon could take well over a month of daily grinding, assuming your luck wasn't terrible. Herein lies the core conflict. The game's marketing and aesthetic promised freedom and empowerment, a world where player effort was the main currency, and yet the underlying systems governing progress were built on restriction and frustration. It was, for all intents and purposes, a Warframe skin stretched over the skeleton of a punishing gacha RPG. That contradiction is what forced the developers to make a choice. With that level of friction clear to everyone in the beta, Pan Studio was facing a serious problem. Their response came during the global launch announcement stream, an event that felt less like a marketing presentation and more like a public course correction. They effectively walked through the biggest complaints and one by one announced their removal. The most direct response came first. The stamina system was abolished. The entire Sanergy system was gone. Just like that, gone like your father. The primary gate forcing players to log off after a handful of missions was removed. From there, the next announcement sent a shockwave through the community. All gacha mechanics for characters and weapons were being removed. This is truly the unprecedented part. Many players in the beta had considered the gacha to be relatively generous. Instead of simply tweaking it, Pan Studio's decision to rip it out entirely signaled a complete philosophical shift. All characters and all weapons would now be earned in-game. This, of course, led to the final piece of the puzzle. If you remove the primary way these games make money, how do you keep the lights on? How are you gonna buy your yacht, you feel me? Like every game developer nowadays needs a yacht or two. Their answer was a total pivot in monetization. The business model was rebuilt from the ground up to be based purely on optional cosmetic items, skins, and accessories that change how you look, not how you play. The developers were also surprisingly transparent about their reasoning. Both the game producers producer 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗵𝗁 and the CEO of Hero Games stated that these changes were a direct consequence of player feedback. They framed it as a strategic choice for long-term health, arguing that building player trust was more valuable than the short-term profits of a gacha model. The key takeaway here is the sheer scale of the change. Pan Studio didn't just adjust some numbers or improve drop rates, they identified the core systems causing friction and performed a clean surgical removal. This wasn't just a fix, it was a fundamental alteration of the game's DNA right before launch. Get it? The game's DNA. Duet, 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗵𝗁, DNA. Anyways, it created an entirely new set of questions. With the old systems gone, what does this new version of DNA actually look like? The new core loop is exactly what you would expect from the anime Warframe label. Progression is now built entirely on an unlimited grind. If you need a new character, you farm their character fragments. If you want a new weapon, you run missions for forging materials. With no stamina bar, you can play for 30 minutes or 8 hours. The only limiter is you and your Asian parent. This is where the comparison to Warframe becomes the most important lens for viewing the game. Mechanically, the parallels are obvious. Instance-based missions, a crafting-centric gear system, and even the Demon Wedge system, which is a direct stand-in for Warframe's modding. However, there is a profound distinction between their models that changes everything. The lack of a player-driven economy. Let me explain why that matters. A huge part of Warframe's reputation for fairness comes from its player-to-player trading. In that game, you can grind for rare items and sell them to others for platinum, the premium currency. This creates a legitimate path for a free-to-play user to earn the currency needed for anything in the game, including cosmetics. Duet 𝗖cie𝗽𝗆𝗵𝗁, based on current announcements, does not have this. Its economy is a one-way street. The only way to get premium items is to buy them directly from the developer. There is no in-game path to earning them through effort and trade. This decision puts immense pressure on two parts of the design. First, the cosmetics must be exceptionally high quality to justify a direct purchase. Second, the grind itself has to be intrinsically rewarding. The gameplay has to be fun on its own, because there is no secondary economic payoff for your time. You aren't farming something you could potentially sell. You are only farming for yourself. This leads to the central question of this new model. Does an unlimited grind simply trade a wallet-draining problem for a time-draining one? While a gacha system can feel predatory on your money, a limitless grind can feel just as predatory on your time, creating its own pressure to play constantly and risk burnout. The freedom from stamina is a double-edged sword, and the game's long-term success will depend on how well they balance it. So after analyzing the risk and the pressures of this new model, it is worth taking a step back to consider what this pivot actually represents for the broader gaming landscape. Moments like these are exceptionally rare. A live service game already built on a gacha framework. Completely removing that foundation is almost unheard of. It is a direct response to a community that has grown increasingly wary of predatory monetization and FOMO, the fear of missing out that drives so many of these models. This is where player behavior becomes critical. The most powerful message the community can send to the industry isn't through angry forum posts or negative reviews, but through engagement. If a game like Duet 𝗖𝗍𝗆𝗵𝗁 succeeds, if it proves that a cosmetic-only model in this genre is commercially viable, it creates a powerful proof of concept. A success here doesn't just mean one less gacha game on the market, it sends a clear signal to other developers and, more importantly, to their publishers that there is a massive, undeserved audience waiting for games that respect their time and intelligence. It provides a tangible incentive for other studios to consider less aggressive monetization, knowing there is a path to profitability. Conversely, if the game fails, it reinforces the narrative that these player-friendly models are unsustainable risk, ensuring that the gacha formula remains the default for years to come. In that sense, supporting a game like this isn't just about a single product, it is about voting for a healthier gaming ecosystem with your time and attention. And while the execution still needs to be proven, the intent here is something worth celebrating. When you look at this entire sequence of events, it is clear this decision was more than just a simple pro-consumer gesture. It was a shrewd and calculated survival strategy. Remember the market they were preparing to enter? There is just some games in the gacha scene that is just constantly undefeated, and the hype for upcoming titles are immense. The beta feedback made it painfully clear. Launching another gacha game with a hostile progression system would have been a death sentence. They would have been torn apart on arrival, I think. Their pivot was an act of strategic retreat. Instead of trying to be an ex-gacha game killer, they looked at the race and simply chose to exit entirely. In doing so, they have carved out a new, potentially defensible niche for themselves as a fair, grind-based, cosmetic-driven action RPG. It is a high-risk gamble that nonetheless gives them a unique identity in a hopelessly crowded market. They traded the predictable revenue of a gacha model for massive community goodwill and a powerful marketing narrative that no competitor can currently claim. As we have discussed, however, the success of this new model now hinges entirely on the quality of that grind. So I'll leave you with your own opinions, but that is all from me, 𝗖𝗍𝗆𝗆, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!